Hello, I am Tobias Silver, the Sump Addict, and this inviting hole in the ground is Ogof Glan Hepste. Now, you just saw me kind of pop past someone on the way, and that is my partner Daisy, and she has just valiantly dug open the entrance. So we got to this cave, the landowner, who I recently renegotiated the re-entry for, showed us the entrance, and it was full of foliage, and said, "Oh, you'll never get in." So I went up to grab the car, to grab the kit, and by the time I got back down again, Daisy had finished. She was very quick.
Oh, this looks much nicer.
So the reason I say that is we were given two entrances. So we were shown Ogof Glan Hepste 1, which is this entrance, and Ogof Glan Hepste 2, which is another entrance. And I had a brief look into Glan Hepste 2 because it wasn't full of foliage, and it looked awful. Whereas this one is significantly nicer. You do a little bit of crawling or kind of narrow rift moving, and then you end up in this little icy duck, and then you pop over to the dive base. Now here is me and my dive buddy Piotr handing the cylinders down.
Drop sling. I need to hand it back up because I can now clip it into the crab.
Shall I go down or wait?
Give me a second.
So we cut to the underwater, and the reason we do that is I very quickly kitted up, and me and Piotr decided that the best course of action, given how small the dive base was for me to head down once kitted, for him to have time to kit up, and I tie in my first couple tie-offs. Now, there is no line in this sump because it's all been washed out. The last person to dive here was about 10 plus years ago, and this means that it's in, shall we say, questionable state. We don't know what it's like. No one recently has checked, so we are figuring it out. Now, given that we had to remove a bunch of foliage from the entrance, we're expecting a lot of foliage, and that is what we find. So some foliage made it through and was washed down into the sump, and as you can see here, we are a little bit blocked in by the foliage. So as Piotr is slowly heading down, I am moving all this foliage to kind of clear the way on. There's not a huge amount in this entrance, so we kind of push it to the side, or well, I kind of pick it up and push it to the side to clear the way. I kind of lay it down to the left of the dive base. Now, as I'm doing this, I have the kind of 5mm pink poly prop that is my kind of signature to tie in to the first nice big rock I have found, and there is one there that looks rather lovely. So I'm just pulling some slack out to tie around it. We're right near the end of this tiny little spool already, so I am just kind of making sure there's a nice good tie off here on the secondary, and there will be a nice good tie off a little bit later for the final tie off of this reel. So as I'm kind of doing this, Piotr's still on top kitting up. I think he's probably about figuring out his way down now, but unlike me, he has got some line to follow, so he's a lot more efficient. And he is quite close behind me, to be honest. He's still kitting up at this moment in time. He's almost about to go. But I am desperately trying to find this secondary tie-off. So I did the big kind of secondary down there, but I want to do a couple more because we have seen from the thickness of the tiny scraps of rope we pulled from the dive base that this sump does absolutely eat the line, though having looked at it, it's not necessarily something that we can expect to happen to this, because it is over 10 plus years that this sump has been slowly destroying this line. So as we pop into the sump, you can see this fantastic visibility. Now, we are currently in a drought in the UK, and when this dive was filmed, we were part of that drought. And that means that a lot of the conditions of these kind of sumps that rely on water not flowing through them to kind of wash the stuff into them are fantastic. Everything's had time to settle, and we really are enjoying the beautiful visibility, even if the environment is less happy at being left like that. So here is the end of my pink line. I have zip tied the reel directly to the thing and leaving it there. I am at a later date going to come along and attach more line to this and snooping it properly, but we were making do with what we had, and what I had was a bunch of jump lines and a bunch of repair spools. So we were making do with some thin line. We are going to be back here to do a lot more soon. So there's Piotr with his big orange gloves, and we spent a bit of time kind of sorting some stuff out, ready to go. And this is where a little bit of distraction goes on. Now, as we came in, there was a very large bit of passage to the left of me that I didn't spot. So what I am doing now is I'm tying in my jump reel, and I am heading down what I think is the way on, and it's just a narrowing rift to some foliage blockage and nothing particularly interesting, but I'm kind of giving it a drag and seeing if there's a way I can get in. Now, it is frightfully obvious from rewatching this that I completely missed the onward way on. I also know what happens in a couple of minutes where Piotr points out the way on that he didn't miss, but I did. This just happens sometimes. It's, you know, if you haven't got line to follow and you're having to route find, sometimes you do spend an inordinate amount of time pushing something that isn't important because the passage looks like it's kind of tending that way and you just miss something. I also saw these rifts in the ceiling and was quite excited to see if I could find a way through something that looked rather tricky, so I kind of bolted straight for it. Now, the other thing to notice here is you can see the visibility is getting rather poor as I'm jamming my face in a bunch of foliage. But when I pull out of it, which I will a couple of times, you'll see that it's not travelling. Now, that is fantastic news. That means that the silt is heavy and there is static flow. So heavy silt in static flow just kind of washes up and then flops back down again. And that's fantastic for maintaining good visibility in this style of sump. Now, I'm kind of continuing on, and at some point Piotr will get bored of me doing this because it clearly isn't the way on, and he will pull on my fin and I will turn around and he'll kind of point out the passage to me. I'm still noodling away at this kind of wrong lead because I think I have found little bits, and to be fair to me, like, I have got surprisingly far into this obvious, like, not good bit of passage. At this point now, Piotr has pulled my fin and I'm turning into what is much more obviously the way on. This is nice big swimming passage. Now, well, it's not particularly big, it's still quite low, but it is swimmable passage. Now, you may notice I'm bottom crawling here, and I do want to just very briefly talk about bottom crawling. So, bottom crawling is a very UK technique, and the reason I say that is because it would be frowned upon in certain cave systems in things like Mexico and Florida. Now, obviously, Florida bottom crawling is not feasible because of the flow. But in Mexico, while there's quite a lot of static sumps, the reason bottom crawling is not appreciated is because usually you have the space to swim, and in general the average kind of sump in Mexico is big and spacious, which allows you to kind of default to swimming. Now, I do often get people kind of commenting when I say things along the lines of every sump, you know, when I talk about UK sump diving being miserable. And I do definitely want to point out here there are some fantastic cave dives in the UK. I mean, Porth Ogof was the first one I covered because it is one of my favourites. It's really, really quite nice. And there are other pleasant dives in the UK. However, a fair amount of the dives I do are fairly tight and narrow, and bottom crawling is quite common as a technique. Now, this means that kind of in the UK, given that we're unlikely to see any other divers, especially given I needed special permission to dive this sump from the landowner, we're less focused on preserving the visibility and more about getting stuff done, which does mean that we can kind of often make decisions like bottom crawling for ease of exploration rather than doing it properly in swimming. However, Piotr is doing it behind me. The only reason I've not done it is that my wing's not plugged in, and I'm more focused on the exploration. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you look at the water, there's this kind of thin white wisps and a huge amount of vegetation. That white wisp is sulfide, and it's the decomposing vegetation that is found here. Now, as you can see, there's that little bit of way on from there that's very clearly the way into the cave, but it's too small to swim through. So this dive that was originally line laying and not necessarily exploration, but like re-line laying the passage for future dives, for future exploration, has now turned into a digging dive. So I find a nice suitable rock, tie off to it so that I have a good tie off at this point in time. This is kind of exactly at the dig face, And one thing to kind of point out here is actually where we are is pretty much directly below the Ogof Glan Hepste 2 dive base. Now at the time I did this I didn't know, so I decided I was just going to dig and see if I could shift and stack, which is a method that I use quite frequently, and the idea is you basically just pull it, put it to the side and stack it to the side of you, so that you can kind of push your way through. Now actually I'm planning to go back there as I'm recording this voiceover in about 4 days to remove all of this, as much of this vegetation as I can, out through the Glan Hepste 2 entrance, rather than doing what I'm doing now. As you can see, pulling all this vegetation is absolutely ruining the visibility. However, again, we have the heavy silt thing. The visibility for the rest of the sump is actually still pretty intact. And as I kind of pull myself out the dig, I notice something. My buddy's orange hands and a thumb up signal. Now, a thumb up signal is the signal to end a dive. And because in cave diving anyone can turn the dive at any time for any reason, we immediately end the dive here. Like, that's it. You know, we want to make sure no one ever feels pressured to continue a dive when they are not feeling it, and that is why we immediately end dives the moment one person says so. It's so that people can feel comfortable to just say, hey, you know, something's wrong, I just want to end the dive, and we all do it. It keeps us safe. So Piotr's heading out, and we kind of agreed that the same way we went in was going to be the same way we went out, i.e. he dekits and I follow him and wait at the bottom. So what I decide to do is, as he's heading out, I am kind of cleaning up the line and putting in zip ties to make my temporary line, which is this kind of loop and lock. And in fact, most tie-offs are actually loop and lock, so what you would normally do on a secondary tie-off. It's just because the rock shapes were not kind of ideal. And I am adding a zip tie to them to kind of keep them closed. Now, this is still not, you know, good enough for a permanent tie-off at all. If you're doing a kind of more permanent tie-off with line, with thin line, you'll probably do something like a clove hitch or something else. But this is specifically done just so that it can be more... well, it has a more chance of still being about when I am here next time. So adding these little zip ties sorted it was just to kind of make sure it stayed there. Now what I'm doing is I'm just adding a couple extra belays again. So one of the things I do quite frequently whenever I'm laying new line is I clean it on the way out. So I take my kind of fairly messily quickly laid line for the exploration and just kind of make it neater, make it happier, and make it significantly less likely to get caught. I'm also adding more zip ties again for the same reason, just kind of keep stuff attached so it's more likely to still be there and not be floating loose next time I'm there. So as I'm heading out, I'm taking some time doing this. Now Piotr hasn't realised what I'm doing and is getting mildly concerned that I am not following him and I'm still diving. Now, we have done dives together where we may have kind of talked about before the dive, we're doing it as a solo dive with friends, i.e. if you want to turn, I'm still going to get stuff done. But we had not agreed this, so there he pops up again, asking if I'm okay. So I give him the okay signal back with my torch and follow him out again. So yeah, we talked about this afterwards, and basically he thought I got lost, so he went back for me, which is very nice of him. In general, if I'm on my way out, I tend to concern myself with myself, but obviously we're doing this dive as a team dive. Now, as you can see here, Piotr is valiantly finning and is very, very nicely swimming along in this fairly low passage as I kind of trundle along behind him. This is... and this has alerted me to the fact that he was catching his fins in the line. Now, to me, that is a potential entanglement hazard, and I head slightly back to come find that last belay to basically push it further away, so it's less likely to be an entanglement hazard in general. Now, again, Piotr probably is a bit concerned as to where I am, but he's come in and checked I'm okay, so he continues on to the exit, and we are quite close to the exit now. We're nearly at the last little bit. So as we kind of make our way out, we you can see the visibility is getting a little bit worse, and this is just because of the amount of time we've been in here. Despite it only being 15 minutes into the video, we are probably somewhere around 30 minutes into the dive. I did spend quite a while moving foliage in that area that's all been cut out because you can't really see anything, and it's, you know, I've already done a video on very low visibility, so there's no need to repeat and retread that. And I'm just kind of slowly repairing line as Piotr gets out and sorts himself. So as we kind of continue on with this dive, Piotr is taking his kit off in that thin little dive base, and we are about to head out. Now, the other thing I like to talk about on this dive is the setups we're running. So you haven't had too much of a look at what Piotr's running and what I'm running, but we're doing our usual thing, which is where he's running a dry suit and I'm running a wetsuit. Now, my previous wetsuit setup used to be a 5mm with a 2mm short john underneath it, and that was a little chilly. So I decided to treat myself and get myself a much warmer shorty to wear underneath my 5mm. So I got myself a surfing 4/3mm wetsuit, which is an Anox wetsuit, and I absolutely adore it. It is warmer than my 5mm. So with that being that, I was actually too hot when I wore the 5mm over the top of it, so I have kind of swapped to a 5mm long john canyoning setup with a 3mm just very, very cheap wetsuit top over the top of that. So this means that I'm kind of reaching about 14mm on the chest, which is a lot of neoprene, and a kind of minimum of about 5mm in other places, so that I still don't have quite the weight requirement. I still require a fair amount of weight, but I am now as warm as I would be in my dry suit, and I don't have to worry about creating a hole and having a leak and being very cold. So as I kind of continue on here, the lovely bits of foliage are still getting in the way. In fact, actually, Piotr took up a big tree with him, which he was a bit surprised with. When he came up, he basically got caught on a bit of tree and was just pulling it up and taking it out and out and out and out, and it just kept going and going and going until eventually I saw it at the dive base, and it was this huge, huge piece of tree that he dragged out with him. So here I am at the bottom. You can see the line go sharply upwards. That means I'm at the dive base, and you will now get to see the wonderful little dive base from the bottom. So there is this kind of interesting little rift that we're joining into, and a little bit potentially on the other side that may be worth having a look at. But I am kind of pulling myself up. Now obviously I don't have my wing on, even though I have fins and I actually have a wing on. I just couldn't be bothered plugging it in because I was just bottom crawling, so, you know, oh well. As we kind of pull myself up and fin upwards, you will start to see Piotr's fins. So I'm kind of arriving here into the dive base, and as you see, he's rather close to me, and I don't really have much space at all. I'm going to kind of pull myself up into the rift. You can kind of see there's not really much space for both of us, and you will see as I kind of breach the surface just how close together we were. It was definitely awkward getting up together, but yes, that was a fairly good dive. We made some good progress, laying about 50 meters of line in there, and we had some good bit of fun. As you can see, Piotr is right next to me. So as we kind of go here, we reach the way out, and this is part of the way out. I just very briefly want to mention and thank my partner Daisy for helping out here. She was out there waiting for us, acting as our call out, and was the person who valiantly dug open the cave itself. But on top of that, with just an oversuit and a pair of canyoning boots and just normal clothes underneath, she helped Piotr get some cylinders out through this icy duck. So for us as divers, we're in our, you know, Piotr's in his dry suit, I'm in my thick wetsuit. Dropping back into the water is basically, you know, not even an inconvenience. Whereas for her, in her basically just normal clothes, with a caving suit over the top, it was really cold for her. So, you know, just shows that the people who come along to help with these diving expeditions don't just sit and watch half the time. They're often doing a lot of really good work, helping out, and as we drag our cylinders out. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and have a wonderful rest of your day.